Welcome to the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. We're here again with
Part 3
of our episode with Scott McQueen. We've been talking about art fairs, everything, and we actually in the break we were talking about bicycling and bobcats. But maybe we'll let you imagine that. Thank you so much. So we've talked in the past episode really a lot about your art career. Right. But what led to the art career in a way was a big change in your profession. And yes. Actually you wrote a book about it called Reasonable Doubt, A Case for LGBTQ Inclusion in the Institutions of Marriage and Church. And this was written in 2018.
Yes.
And so have you written was this your only book, or have you written?
No, that's the only book that I wrote.
Okay, we'll put a link to this on the YouTube.
Well, that'd be fine. Right now, though, in a strange sort of way, I'm going to have to go back and rework the entire situation. Long and short of it is the publisher was a small time. It was not a big publishing company. And the fellow who was overseeing all of that part of it, he passed away in November.
Oh, no.
And was from Texas. Nice guy. But his family really, they just basically said, it wasn't left to anybody. It's not left to anything. And so
you can't make more copies.
So now when I'm wanting to purchase for me to have extra books, mm-hmm. It was on Amazon. You could buy it. I think you can still get it on audio and Kindle kind of thing, that kind of thing. But I don't think you can get the paper copy right now, which is what I'm old school.
Yeah, I like to have the paper.
So I don't have a lot of those copies left. And anyways, I'm going to have to, I've gone and researched and tried to see what I could do, but it looks like I'm going to have to go back and do the whole thing over like ISB and get a new number and go back and good thing is I've got all of that stuff saved, but still the logistics of it, and I don't, doing 24 shows a year, you just don't have time.
To also write.
Right. So it's kind of like, crap, I'm going to, but I will do it. It's just doing it.
Okay.
So, but anyway, you can still put a link on there.
We'll still do that, and if you could get the Kindle copy.
May not be available right now.
That's right. Okay. So you also have, I've seen, the art fair and the really public versions of your art, but I feel like there's also, you do some more political or message pieces.
I do a lot of that,
and
actually.
You want to talk about what the impetus for that, and also kind of what, just anything you want to say.
Well, just cutting to the chase, I was a Southern Baptist pastor for 31 years. Small churches, large churches. I wasn't always the senior pastor, but I was most of all those years.
And I want to say you have a doctorate in divinity.
I do.
So we should call you Dr. Scott.
No. I never did. I didn't. I didn't like it when I was pastoring. I tried to get them to just call me Scott, but you always had the old school folks that was Brother Scott.
Okay.
That's the same people that knew me as Steve McQueen.
Right.
and the folks that knew me as Lightning wanted to call me Pastor Scott.
Okay.
So it's kind of funny, but that's kind of, but I always felt more comfortable just being Scott, and still do. A lot of people didn't even know I had those degrees. I tried. I didn't really hide it, but it wasn't that I wasn't proud of the degree. The work, but I didn't earn the degrees so that somebody could call me doctor so and so.
Okay. Sure.
I was, again, I'm a workaholic, and when I do something, I don't want to have to. And so the same thing was true with ministry. When I committed to ministry, I went to Samford University, which is in Birmingham.
Beautiful campus.
Beautiful campus. And so I earned my bachelor's there, and then I did my master's degree at New Orleans, which was New Orleans was a a very reputable Southern Baptist school, and I was Southern Baptist, grew up that. That's all I knew. And then I went and did my doctoral work through Luther Rice Seminary, and people that were in more of the conservative Baptist circles would recognize that, and especially back in the day, that was where people like, the name dropping, like Charles Stanley, that people have heard of. He was a prominent pastor in Atlanta and big in the Southern Baptist. He went to school there.
Sure.
And then there was a fella named Adrian Rogers, and he was pastor of this huge church in Memphis.
There's a lot of prestige involved.
It was kind of where the names that were in the Southern Baptist circles in that day, that's where they were going and doing their doctoral work. And so I thought, if it's good enough for those guys.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mindset I had, and so that's where I went.
Okay.
So that's where I did my work, and then worked kind of as an associate or a youth pastor, that sort of thing, until 1989. So from when I went into the ministry was in '84, and was serving in church capacity from '84 on, and then in '89 became pastor of church, senior pastor of a church, still going through school, and earned my doctorate by '94. So
Okay.
I just was full-time everything, just full go. And
I'm sure your family was really proud.
yeah, well, they were, and my mother especially. She was one of the people that wanted to make sure that I'd get, if I ever had a letter or a birthday card or anything from her. I think she sent me cards just so she could write doctor on the front. So everybody had to know and that sort of thing. But yeah, everything was rocking along. My wife and I, we've been married 42 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so we knew each other from school, growing up children, actually. We've been knowing each other since we were about 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we've always known each other. It's just basically, and to be honest, we were really good friends up till about our 12th grade school year. And summer before 12th grade, something kind of clicked, and we decided, we're going to hang around each other all the time, be friends. I guess she thought, she was tired of paying Dutch,
Okay.
You're going to date and you're going to buy. So that's kind of, but no, in all seriousness, we started dating, and so, we were married in '83.
Yeah.
And so June of '83.
Yeah, my husband and I were married July, our anniversary's coming up, '82. So
Yep.
right in there.
Yeah, so we were June of '83, and
So you're really living the life. You've got,
yeah,
pastor, wife.
we're busy. Yeah,
Have
started having children. Have three sons, and we're proud of all three. And they're all doing well. Our oldest went. He he was a Marine, active Marine during Afghanistan and all that. And that's another story we won't go into. But he's doing well now. He was there in a really tough time.
We asked a lot of them.
Yeah, and saw a lot of action, more than he wanted, more than we wanted. But at any rate, he's alive and has all his limbs, and so we're a lot to be thankful for. And he's better, he's doing well. Had a lot of PTSD stuff, and I have a new appreciation for people that go through that and deal with it. But then our middle son, he's a school teacher. He teaches English lit or American lit at Sipsey Valley right now.
Great.
He's a 10th grade school teacher.
That's wonderful.
And so, and then he and his wife, they have 2 children. That's our that's the grandkids. So we have 2 grandchildren. And then our youngest son, Addison, he lives over in Irondale, but works out of Hoover, big salon there. He's a hairstylist, works at Jeremy Stevens Salon, which is right there
All right.
in the shadow of the Hoover Met, and
Right.
right there in that big, busy area. And
Yeah.
he's doing
Just a
crazy
little,
good with
a
that.
little plug.
Yeah, but
Vote
he's-
for Liz Lane in Hoover City Council.
There you go. There you go. And so that's kind of what's going on. And but to get to the chase, what basically the impetus that eventually moved me into a full-time folk art career is that our third son is gay.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing about it. It was always,
It should have been fine. Right?
well, I was conditioned as a Southern Baptist
Mm-hmm.
that this is wrong, and but the thing is that I noticed something was different about him about the time he was 2 years old.
Right.
My wife noticed it too. We both
Sure.
did. It was kind of the elephant in the room that nobody really wanted to talk about. My wife never would discuss it. I would bring it up to her. I'd say something's, no, I'm just not talking about that. But it was, and a lot of people that maybe some of these listeners here that you're like, well, there's this choice that you're making and different, and I've heard all about that. You got to understand, I was in that camp, so I know the arguments better than most.
Sure.
I understand.
Right.
I also understand the upbringing and the conditioning
Yes.
that leads a person to say, well, this is wrong because the Bible, this and the Bible, I mean, I've been there, I've done that, and had plenty of T-shirts. But I was living it in a different way. This was experiential.
Yes.
And it wasn't so much, hey, I'm trying to, because at that time, it's not like our child is 2 years old and he's got a sign, a shirt on that says, I'm a toddler and I'm gay.
Right.
But we could notice certain things that was different about our third child from the other two.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're eating the same chicken and dumplings.
Right.
They're going to the same church, hearing the same preacher who happens to be their dad.
Mm-hmm.
One is not exposed to anything differently than the other two.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're so different.
Mm-hmm.
One likes to go outside and shoot guns and ends up being a Marine. One loves sports and plays and ball and all this other stuff, and he's a teacher, but he's coached and done all that sort of thing too. And then the third one, I kid, he's allergic to sweat.
Right. He wants to do hair.
He wants to stay inside and play with Barbies, and even though he wasn't exposed to that, but he would sneak them if he could.
Sure.
Try to go to somebody's house, or he would take his mother's yarn and hold it like hair, and take his little scissors and cut hair as a toddler, little 3-4-year-old. I mean, child, real small.
Yeah.
And
This is little.
And we accept callings for all kinds of things, and
Right.
yet here we are, like saying, no, you can't do that.
Well, and it really was like that, and so we didn't want to be overreactive to cause attention undue to the fact that we don't want to say anything that's going to in our ignorant mind, well-meaning but ignorant mind, we don't want to do anything to make him gay,
Right.
to turn him gay. But that was kind of how we were thinking. So we would just try to expose him to things that were boyish, things that we thought were, we'll just boy him up, so to speak. I didn't have any problem with the other two. I was their coaches when they were, I was the Little League coaches for both of the other two. And so I was going to be the Little League coach for the youngest one, and I was for 1 year. And bless his heart, I mean, he loved dressing up. He wanted to put on the outfit and look good.
But that's it.
But he did not want to go out on that field and play.
Sure.
And he would literally just stand in the batter's box and cry. And I'm the one throwing the pitch to him.
That was just not him.
He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do anything remotely close to it. Never learned to ride a bike, even though I know girls ride bike. I'm not saying girls do bike, but he didn't want to do. He never did learn to ride.
But he
a bike.
just had his own way.
He just didn't want to do that sort of thing. He was just different in a lot of ways, in his mannerisms, in his talking. One of the things that always, when I was a kid, you're talking about just being honest. Growing up, there were kids in our school that were gay.
Yeah.
You know,
Of
when I was in
course.
high school, there were some kids. It's always been people.
Right.
And so but there were some kids in our school that were gay. I could never understand how those boys were able to change their voice and talk in a high, more effeminate voice. And because surely when they were home, that's not how they talked.
Right.
So they were doing this for show, had to be. Because you just can't do that. You can't act in that mannerism or whatever. But see, that was my ignorance. And it really was that. It was ignorance. But the ignorance followed up by what I grew up, for me at least, and some of you listeners may agree or disagree, but for me, and that's all I can speak for, having that followed up by the church telling me this is wrong, this is a choice, this is sin, so that was reinforcing and causing a greater divide, let's just say it, a prejudice that was in me against those guys that I knew as teenagers in school. That, you know, there's something wrong about that. This is just not right. This is not, and you know, and it just didn't. And then you'd listen to the rhetoric of the preachers that would give you here, you know, there's God just be, you know, there's birds and bees, you know, and there's Adam and Eve,
and we're really
you know,
we're really back to that. Like, I think
Yeah.
there was an opening, in at least politically, and now
that door's about
It's
getting shutting again.
It is, and
Well,
and it's different when you're like it's your child.
Right. Well, seeing it in our child, and it wasn't something like all of a sudden, okay, I'm seeing it in him, so now all of a sudden my thoughts have changed, my beliefs have changed. They didn't initially. It became one of those, I just don't understand this, it doesn't make sense. But I kept hoping that our son in time, you know, again, ignorance, I thought he'll grow out of that. And so, and he was quite popular with the girls. There were girls, when he started getting into high school and junior high school, girls loved being around him. I know now that was because they felt safe around him, because they knew he wasn't going to be a problem.
Right.
He wasn't going to
Right.
hit on them. And
Yeah.
and so he could fix their hair.
Yeah.
He would braid their hair for
Yeah.
them and fix their hair, which I didn't know all that was going on at the time. But so those girls loved him, and he'd have some you know, the best looking girls go, you know, I mean, you know, he had all the popular girls and they were around him all the time. And they'd come over the house, different things. And I was like, man, I keep thinking, you know, and I'd just say to him, you know, why don't you date one of these girls? I mean, they're all like falling all over you, son. We're just friends.
For sure.
And in my mind, the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I know why.
Right.
But you know, again, I didn't want to say anything, and we didn't say anything. It was kind of like, and you know, in some ways we shouldn't say anything, because it's not my place to say that you're gay or you're straight or you're trans or you're this. That's not my place.
Right.
I can't make that choice.
That seems like an obvious thing, but you know, I guess it isn't.
No, it's not. And so it wasn't my truth. That's his truth
That's
that I have
right.
to live out and decide. And you know, he and I have talked about it many times since. And one of the things was that we both talked about, and it kind of, there was never a time in my life when I chose to be straight. There was never a time when I chose to be straight. I didn't wake up and make a cognitive decision one day that I'm going to be straight. I like girls. I'm just going to like girls. I don't want to like boys. I want to like girls. And so I choose that. And so as I've talked with him many times since, you know, he was the same way. He's
Right.
like, I don't understand you, Dad. How can you like Mom? And I'm like, what? And he says, there was never a time in my life
Yeah, it's just not there.
where I chose to be gay.
Right.
I've just always been.
Yeah.
Always knew it.
Yeah.
And he said, even as a little boy, he says, I never thought, well, that's going to be my girlfriend.
Right.
He said, I didn't know that you did that. He said, I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, he said, I knew you and Mom were together, and I didn't really think it through. But I didn't know. He says, that was never a reality or even an option for me. So it just wasn't a choice. And so that's the thing that people will bow up on. And if there's somebody listening right now, you may be bowing up on it right now. But I mean, I'm one who, I mean, I had the pedigree in Southern Baptist conservative background. I mean, I knew it. I believed it. I grew up with it. My mom and dad, I might as well have been born in the church. But I began, what really changed it for me, now there's nothing like that schoolroom of the home, that you begin to see things and you experience things where everything up to that point's been theory,
And I think for, to see what you could see right there with your child, but that was a huge change for you.
It was, and I still wasn't ready to make that change. When my son came out, and it wasn't that he just decided, hey, I'm gonna come out and I'm dating a boy, or I got caught with some. It wasn't anything like that at all. He was not dating anybody. He had not been dating anybody. It wasn't
just who he is.
He was. Yeah. Somebody asked him that was really basically going to throw him under the bus. And he had been put up to it, I think, from what I understand, by his dad. That was a member of our church.
Okay.
They wanted to find out, and so they had the kid that acted like he was well-meaning and just going to ask if he was gay, and he told him, yeah,
sure.
Our son, he is brutally honest, and so he was like, yeah, I am, and I don't, and not attracted to girls, if that's what you're asking, and so then what? By the next day, everybody knew about it, and it got out all over the place. I guess I was one of the last ones to find out. But when I did find out, I talked to my son and I asked him. I said, "Son, I hear everybody saying that you're gay and that you told somebody. Is that so?" And he said, "Yeah." And we had a conversation, and I was very calm. I wasn't freaking out. And one of the reasons I wasn't freaking out, so to be honest, is because deep inside I already knew.
Right.
But I told him, and I regret that I told him this, but, all I knew to say was what I, had been taught to say. So I was like a parrot, not a parent, but a parrot. And I was just basically speaking what I had been spoken. So I was like, well, I'm just really disappointed in this choice you're making. And he was like, Dad, it's not a choice. He said, if I could choose something different, don't you think I'd be choosing that?
It'd be a lot easier.
He says, why do I want to make this hard on myself? He says, it's not like I've got a boyfriend and I'm just decided to do it. He says, I'm just being truthful to who I am. He says, I can't help it he says, maybe something's wrong. He even said, maybe something's wrong with me. Maybe I've got something mentally wrong. And I said, no, you're not. I said, you're fine in every way, I said, but what is stereotyped here, this is, I said, but I don't understand it. I said, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And so that's what led ultimately to me writing the book, was I sat down and I started taking notes and I did research. And because even though I had seen it, it wasn't enough for me to throw away everything that I had believed in all my life, because, one's beliefs are deep-seated.
Yes.
That's core value stuff. But
you're very thorough.
And I was extremely thorough on that. Where a lot of times I would be like, nah, with artwork, it's just throw the paint on there and go, keep going. But with this, when it came to this, and here's another thing, and I always wondered, in some ways, I overkilled my studies. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate, all in theology. And I'd have people who would say, why don't you get your bachelor's in business, and why don't you and then just go get your doctorate in theology? Why do you, have something to fall back on? And I was like, and even then it was like, I don't have a contingent plan. This is what I want to know as much as I can. Well, it afforded me opportunities to spend a lot of time studying biblical Greek and Hebrew. And so I had a working knowledge of both Greek and Hebrew. Never really like speaking it, because they were basically considered dead languages anyway.
Right.
But as far as reading it, there was a time when I could read it pretty well. I could certainly work my way through it, and with the help of a Hebrew lexicon or something, or a Greek lexicon, I could read it and translate it for myself. I had never, over all these years, and I've wondered many times, why didn't I look at it even when my son was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and I had all these questions? Why didn't I go back and look? And maybe it's that I don't know. I just think I was in denial of sort.
Yeah.
I didn't even look at it. I just thought he'll work his way out of this.
It's easier to just not bother with it.
Just to pretend it doesn't exist.
And I think, culture, tradition, everything it's pretty strong.
Right.
And so, to go against that in your tradition is
everybody
difficult.
in my family, my mom and dad, everybody's Baptist. They're all proud of what I do and what I did and what I was, and so there's a lot of that. And it is my livelihood. It's the way I paid bills. It's the way I took care of my family. So it's all I knew. So all of those combined. But but what happens when he came out? I went and sat down, and I got my Greek and Hebrew Bible, and my Greek and Hebrew lexicon, and I got a 2 or 3 versions. I think like a King James and a New International Version and something else. I don't know. I had 2 or 3 versions of the Bible there, and I literally I didn't want to read what anybody had to say. I didn't care what a Charles Stanley or a Spurgeon or any kind of commentaries.
You're going right to the source.
I went to the source.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read it as best I can and interpret. And it took me all of 15 minutes. And most of that was turning to the scripture. But the first thing I came across was a Leviticus passage. And there's a word, kadosh. And kadosh is a Hebrew word for, means holy. And anytime you see that in text in Hebrew in the Old Testament, it means holy, kadosh. Well, Hebrew's kind of weird, and first you read it backwards, and it's just like little wiggly scrigglies. But it also the masculine and the feminines on there would be like if I said kodashim, that'd be like holy man. It was literally meant holy man, kodashim, or kadosha, which is a holy woman. Well, in those passages I was reading, it talked about men lying with men. But when you go and you read it, they would say ish. Ish is man. Like when you go all the way back to Adam and Eve and the man, ish. It was and so it was, when I'm reading it said ish, and then the Hebrew that would be like to not lie, with kodashim. So it said, man should not lie with a holy man.
Right.
And I knew, when I saw that, I was like, wait. Now, you got to know enough about the context.
Sure.
Context is everything. And so you got to go back and look. And so when I went back, and I'm like, wait a minute, wait. You see, back in those days, you didn't have Christianity. You didn't have Buddhism. You didn't have Hindu. You might have had some predecessors, what might become some of that as far as Hindu, because that's old. But even you didn't have Judaism. I mean, even though you had scripture that's going to talk about and people that's going to become, but you didn't have Judaism. You just had these were stories that were being told and recorded, and we debate when and what. But for a conservative person, still, I know that there were no religions as such. I mean, the religions of that day were all to do with fertility gods and goddesses. That was the oldest religions. You don't have a whole lot of these things. You don't find a place down here where you have fertility god and goddesses, and they're offering sacrifices to down here on the corner.
Right.
You know, you got Baptist and Methodist, but no fertility god, you know. You don't have that. So, not these days. But that's all there was then. And they were up on these different, and they'd be on their high places. They'd be like on the mounds, and they would build these things, and it was a tribal, territorial. Well, then you got this bunch of folks coming through there that's trying to worship, that's going to worship one living God, you know, that would eventually become Judaism. And they're traveling through the land, and you know, whether Moses or one of his followers or whomever, you know, is in the Levitical, the Torah, you know, Pentateuch, first 5 book. One of the things was, man shall not lie with a holy man. Now, were they talking about sex? Yes, they were talking about sex. But in the context, the way fertility gods and goddesses and worship practices went in those days is the fertility god was just what we're talking about, fertility. And it had a lot to do with the seasons and equinox and all this kind of stuff. You know, modern day witchcraft and things like that would be a lot of, you know, Wiccan type religion, you know, and I'm not making that in the dark, but just Wiccan religion, pagan type religions where they're following a lot of the you know. Okay, so a lot of that it would be kind of similar in some ways. I mean, you got to remember it's 4,000 years removed,
Right.
or more. But you would have, like, just say you have this priest, and he's representing this god or goddess. Well, if it were a male god, then you'd have male priest. If you had a female goddess, you'd have priestesses. Okay? And so this guy, he's a family man. He's got 6 kids because they didn't have contraceptives. He may have, you know, he's still young. He's got 6 kids. He's a farmer like everybody else. So he's going to take part of his crop and he's going to go up to the temple. And he's going to offer his sacrifice. They're not going to sit down and sing Amazing Grace. They're going to go up to the temple, and they may have some people playing something or doing something, but basically you go to the temple and you burn your incense, you light your flame, you yah, whatever it is you're going to say to the god or goddess. And then the priest would engage in a sexual act with the male of the family. And because the male represented the family. And think of it like this. You know how in Baptist world, Protestant world, you don't have the intercessor. But think of it as in the Catholic world, you know how the priest would go and sit in a confessional booth?
Yes.
And then you'd go in the confessional booth and talk to the priest, and then the priest would pray and do tell you what to do, Hail Mary. But the priest was there as the intercessor. Well, in those Babylonian or pre-Babylonian, way back, you know, practices, they were intercessors. And so to have sex with the priest was to have, it's worship with the god or the goddess. And it was the kids in the family and the wives, they weren't in it. It was only the male, it was the head of the family. And he would go and do this. Or he would go to the priestess, and you didn't get to pick. So it wasn't like he could say, I don't think I want to go to that god, I'm going to go to that. It was all territorial. So if you were in this tribe, you went to, that was your god. If you was in this tribe, this was your god. So whether they might have liked it more to say, hey, you know, we got a priestess goddess, you know, we get some priestesses. I don't think they even thought that way. It wasn't in the mindset. But they weren't in a sexual act like a man lying with a man. There wasn't a relationship like, hey, we love each other and this and that.
It was really a guide against a particular religious practice.
So when he says a man shall not, an ish shall not, an ish being the Hebrew man, you're Hebrew.
So you don't need to do this.
You do not go to the holy man. Because it wasn't, is this male to male sex? He also said don't go to the, and in the King James it was called whore is the word. But if you go back and look at in those where it says whore in the Old Testament, it doesn't say whore.
Yeah.
It says kadosha.
Yeah.
It says holy woman. Do not go lay down with whore. Don't go lay down with holy woman. Don't go lay down with the holy man. What they were saying was, if your religious identity is with Jehovah God, don't go hedging your bets with
all the other gods.
Eshtaroth, which is, by the way, where we get the word Easter. Eshtaroth ended up being Eshtar, and Eshtar ended up being Easter, and that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. But I think the
Hey,
whole...
and while I'm on that real quick,
Yeah.
the fertility thing, wonder why there's rabbits and eggs with Easter. I mean, it's fertility. That's fertility.
Well, and we needed people because it was hard to,
Isn't that crazy?
a lot smaller population then. But I mean, I think that the whole point was it took you very little time to figure this out.
15 minutes because I could read it. And
Okay,
so I read it.
right.
And so then I went to the second pack because I knew
Yeah.
these passages.
Yeah.
So I go to Leviticus.
But there's
go to the
also
other
very
Leviticus.
few passages. In
No,
the
there's
Bible.
only like 6 that are explicit.
And yet...
And not a single one, Old or New Testament. If you go back and you look and you read it in its original language, it is not saying, and nor has the intent to what we have come to believe it to be, and it's certainly in that evangelical conservative world in which I was a part. And so because of that, it caused a great turmoil in a lot of ways, to say the least. But one thing I knew was that for me, experientially speaking, I had to admit that I was wrong, and then I had to try to fight that prejudice that was deep-seated in me, because there was that prejudice. So even though I knew something intellectually, I still had to get to where it didn't bother me. And for a while it did bother me, but I had to work through that, because not only was my son worth it, but all of the countless hundreds and thousands of people that have been railed upon and abused, some murdered, others just rejected, families that have kicked kids out,
terrible.
And what have you.
Right.
And and what I know that it didn't help. One of the things that I struggled with was a lot of the things like Pride Days and stuff like that, and where a lot of that is open and out and almost kind of right in, and I had to struggle through some of those things. And I'm still in me, the conservative is, I still believe in monogamy, I don't, to be polyamorous and,
Well, that's a different
right.
thing.
So for me, and that's what I told my son, and that's what, I told all of my kids really, but if you're in be true in the relationship you're in, and, but see, the mindset is if they're gay, you're just wild and crazy.
Instead of just...
And a lot of that's tied to the 80s concept too, of the, the AIDS epidemic, and, well, they're running around, but a lot of that's fallacy too, because there were a lot of straight people that died from AIDS. Sure. And still do.
Sure. So, but I mean, it really led to this huge change for your profession.
It did.
And I think, I've always been impressed that I felt like, you really, you went back very thoroughly and researched some things, but also basically chose your son over your profession, and, that...
Well, I did, but I told him, one of the things I told him early on was, I said, I'm not going to give you, I told him before I did the research, as a matter of fact, that night, I said, I'm not going to give you a pass, son. I said, what I am going to do is love you unconditionally, but I'm not going to give you a pass. I said, I've grown up believing what I believe. I've reinforced that with the study, with 3 degrees, whatever that's, but all of the study that was required to earn those degrees. Everything that I've ever read has been seen through those glasses. That's, and I said, I can't give you a pass. I said, but my mind can be changed. But the only way it's going to be changed is if that scripture tells me. And at that time, that's what I went off of. But when I went and sat and I read those scripture, and I could read for myself, and and it wasn't, I guess somebody could say, well, that's open for interpretation. Well, everything in the entire Bible is open for interpretation. Every single word. People say, well, the Bible says this and the Bible says. I have yet to hear a Bible speak a single word. Now that tick people off, but be honest, let's think about it. The Bible says nothing, but we read it, and then through the lens and the mindset and the experience and the knowledge, we then begin to interpret, and then we call upon others, so people that we respect or people that we think, but they are doing the same thing. They're learning. There's not any of those guys. I've been around a lot of those pastors over the years. I've been around, and they put their pants on just like I did. They eat the same kind of food. They have the same issues. They say, they went to the same schools. A lot of them that I went to had the same teachers. Had the same. So we all interpret the way we interpret. But I could read that passage. I knew what it was. I knew when it said "holy man," "holy woman," and I knew when I saw those some of those other passages and what they're saying. I knew that this is not. I'm not necessarily saying that every bit of it was purposely misinterpreted. Sometimes I wonder.
Well, and there's a lot. That's part of what I can see is it's easy what the Bible says over and over and over again.
Right.
Which is, it's not about the rules. It's about relationships. It's about treating people justly.
Well,
and over
loving
and over
your
again.
neighbor.
And loving your neighbor, and I
think that's the real message, and it seems like that's the one that we want to talk about the least.
Right. It's the hardest to do.
Seems like judge our neighbor is what we really wish was in that passage.
And right now, it seems like a perilous time where Christianity is being used to harm people.
Well,
and by the powerful.
There's a lot of manipulation, but there's been a lot of if you go back and you look at church history, there's been a lot of manipulation over the centuries.
And
that's nothing new.
Yeah, and it comes back to using power, I think,
right.
over.
But I think for me, I've just tried to keep it a lot. It's a lot simpler for me just to, to be. I think that being kind and loving your neighbor. I don't have to tolerate. The people are saying like, well, I'm tolerating it, or I'm this or that. Well, it doesn't say anything about tolerate your neighbor. It doesn't say to. So right. I think that we have to do our very best.
And it's reflected in your art practice. And
it does, and so I paint things that are. I try to paint things that are uplifting, colorful. Even the things that are very benign and generic, are colorful and uplifting and positive message. But I do paint a lot of things. People will ask me, are you a minister any longer? Are you and I'm an artist, but
you have an art ministry in a way.
But I think that it doesn't matter. I think we're all ministering for something. Some of it's helpful and beneficial, and some of it is degrading, and but we're influencers in the world. We all have our circle of influence, and so I think of it more as just if I can influence anybody, I want to prompt people toward loving one another and being kind and.
That leads me to our final little bit, which is what do you see next for your career and your goals in your life?
Well, I'm enjoying what I do, and I'm going to continue doing it as long as I'm physically able.
No plan B.
There is no plan B.
That's great.
I just keep doing art. I've got a full calendar. It's like I say, this weekend I'll be up in Berea, Kentucky, and then in August I'll be up in North Carolina doing shows 2 weekends back to back. Right in the middle of just burning up. End of all last 2 weekends in August. Then I'll have a couple of weekends off, and then it gets really busy.
Yeah.
Then I start
the fall.
September and October and through about the second week of November. I think I've got 1 week open, and then And then I do one in Huntsville in December to finish out
Wow.
the year. So
I think it's important to reiterate to people who are not artists, but might go to these festivals, is that it's not a weekend job. The artist actually has to work all week to create.
That's right.
day and night sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it is ongoing. And, part of it, that we're just kind of compelled to do it, so.
Yeah, it
that's all
really
right.
is. It is a compulsion.
Yeah.
I mean,
It helps to be workaholic.
I do what I do because I
Yeah.
love it, though.
That's really it. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think we
Covered a
could
lot.
just keep going, but we'll end for now.
Okay.
So Sheryl, it's time to watch our shows.
I gotta go watch my shows.